Which board should I buy? Super epic top of the line flagship edition. So we got here the new Onewheel GTS series from Future Motion. And over here we have the Floatwheel ADV. This is the standard ADV with the Pro battery up in front. So this has got the split pack in it. So this is top of the line. Which board is better? Let's find out. So what we're gonna do essentially is I got a whole bunch of different categories and we're gonna rank them in the different categories and then you guys can sort of see which one is better for you. Let's jump right into it. Here's the different categories that we're gonna rank all these in. First, we got safety, speed / torque, price / bang for the buck. We got range. Super important one is range, I think. Size and weight. We got looks / aesthetics. Which one looks better? Again, real subjective on that one probably, but we're gonna dive into it. Third-party support / customizability. Repairability / cost of ownership. And finally, ease of use, out the box. And what else did I write here? What does that even say? Feasibility? Does that say feasibility? I don't even know what that says. Basically, easy use, out the box. So let's talk safety. So the big safety concern when it comes to Onewheels, I think, is probably nosedives. I'm sure everyone's gonna agree on this. And there's a couple of different things that cause nosedives, but essentially at the end of the day, it's like, did you overpower the front of your board and try to accelerate harder than the motor could keep you up? That's like 99% of nosedives is that. And then there's also like 1% of nosedives might be like actual legit hardware failure. As far as the first nosedive, the way more common version of nosedives is, hey, did you overpower the front of the board? Both of these boards are gonna be super, super safe when it comes to that aspect. The GTS has got a ton of voltage, a ton of torque. The ADV has got a ton of torque. Some would argue even possibly more than the GTS. So as far as the overloading the front to cause a nosedive safety aspect of these boards, I'd say they're pretty damn similar. They're right across the board. You're not probably going to over torque the front nosedive unless you're a crazy person like Humble Savage out there and try to go 35 miles an hour within like 100-yard distance. Don't do that. Don't do that. But you know, if you're riding within the safety limits, you're keeping it like under 25 miles an hour, short of you hitting a pothole or catching something unexpected, you're probably not going to nosedive these things from over torque on the front. So as far as like the hardware failure versions of these go, it's the way more rare way, but who knows, you know, you can always catch one of those hardware failures on either board. So it is what it is. There is one thing to note on the ADV is that the BMS does have an issue currently on this V1 BMS, where if your cells are wildly out of balance and you drop one of those cells below its cutoff point, the board can shut down on you at speed. So that is a problem. Now, when it comes to Onewheels, I've had every single version shut down on me at speed personally. But you know, that's how it goes with these devices. Not everything is 100% failure proof. The nice thing about like Floatwheel that's based on a VESC open source software is you can actually get data logs on that and sort of figure out what goes wrong when that does happen on a Onewheel, which again, this is so rare that this happens. But if it does happen, it's like, well, I don't really know what happened. It's just off now and I gotta ship it back and figure it out. So I don't think we have to spend too much time on like hardware failure type stuff because again, it's super rare that that happens, but just know that that can happen with any single-wheeled, one-wheel balancing device. I mean, you're gonna have the same issue on EUCs potentially. Speed and torque. So this is a really fun category. I think this is kind of like the most exciting category because both of these boards are really pushing the limit when it comes to speed and torque. I mean, these definitely have the most torque out of any one-wheel builds out there, especially off-the-shelf type stuff. These suckers both crank. You know, when we compare the ADV versus the GTS versus like the standard GT, we actually took them all out the other day and drag raced them from start to finish all the way up to like, I think I went like 32, 33 miles an hour, something like that. All three boards will sort of be roughly the same up to like 10, 15 miles an hour. The GT can keep up just fine with the GTS up to those speeds. But where the GTS and the ADV really start pulling away is like right around that 15 to 20 mile an hour mark. They really start to pull, and they got a ton of torque and speed when it comes to that point. And then as soon as you hit the 25 mile an hour mark, that's where the GTS actually has that built-in pushback and haptic buzz. So the board's gonna sort of hit a wall right there, but you can push through it. But again, it's really sketchy to push through it because now you've got your tail is way closer to the ground. So now you're losing brakes, and the haptic buzz is rumbling the whole board under your feet. So it's like, yes, you can push past 25 on the GTS, but it's really not very comfortable. And there's no way to raise that ceiling because it's put in by Future Motion and you cannot raise it. Then you've got the ADV where you can set the pushback wherever you want. You can actually see the duty cycle on your app go up. You know exactly when it's gonna hit that 95 and dump you. You also can set audio alerts, which is pretty sweet. So it can tell you in your ear sort of how close you are to that ceiling. And so when you hit 25, that ADV just keeps cooking right past it. Then you can go all the way up to the top speed, which is totally dependent on your weight, the terrain you're on, your PSI, if you have any wind in your face, what you had for breakfast. Like there's so much that determines top speed. I don't feel comfortable going past low 30s. Heck, I don't even feel comfortable in the low 30s. But you know, rumor has it there was a little lady rolling around at the Hollow Flux event going 40 on her ADV. So, you know, there you go. The top speed of this sucker is insane. But honestly, both of them go faster than you should really ever go on a one wheel anyway. So I think the more important thing is the torque, because that low end torque, you're gonna be using that way more than you're gonna be using your top end speed. And both of these have solid low end torque. When we're climbing hills with them at low speed crawls, they both perform almost exactly the same. They're both great, they'll both climb for you. So I'd say they're pretty darn tied when it comes to torque. Price and bang for your buck. So it's no secret, the GTS series is by far and away the most expensive one wheel out there, the most expensive off the shelf one wheel ever designed. It comes in at 3,200 bucks plus tax. And if you're like me here in California, I ended up spending $3,432 on this guy, stock out the box before we put any mods on it. Then we've got the Floatwheel ADV over here. And this one goes for, with the Pro battery, that's the upgraded split pack in the front, goes for 1,749 bucks. And then there's no tax, but you do have to pay shipping on that. And the estimated shipping for USA is 120 bucks. So that puts you right about 1,869 bucks. Nice. So it puts the ADV at almost half the price of the Onewheel GTS. So is it worth it to get one GTS or to actually get like two ADVs? Which one's the better bang for the buck? I would say that's up to you guys to decide, but you could essentially get two ADVs for the same exact price as one single Onewheel GTS. So keep that in mind. Now the category that I feel like you guys care about a ton. A lot of people really care about this one that are big time commuters, like going on super long rides. They'll do 100 miles in the day because they're absolutely insane. That's right, I'm talking range. The Onewheel GTS, let's see what they advertise this as. I don't even remember what they advertise it to go, but we've got 16 to 25 miles of range on the S series, and I would say that's pretty darn accurate. When we take them out, like a full battery burn on these, we'll get like 18 miles on them, and we usually ride kind of pretty aggressively. So if you pump that tire up, you don't weigh a ton, you're just riding like mostly commuting type stuff, I'd say you could get mid-20s, no problem on that. And then we've got the ADV, and we definitely get a little bit more range out of this one for sure, especially with the Pro battery, the split pack. So with the ADV, we typically get around like mid-20s with it, with the way that we ride. So we're talking like 18 miles to the charge or like 23, 24 miles to the charge. So you definitely get a little more range out of the ADV as opposed to the GTS. Size and weight. The GTS is actually marketed at being lighter weight. It's like 2 pounds lighter than the original GT. And where they save that weight is in the battery pack. So it's kind of funny the way that the battery pack works out. It's one big row on the bottom and then about half a row on the top, which makes room for a BMS, big old BMS. They're shaving roughly 2 pounds, pretty much all out of the battery pack on this one. And so it comes in at 33 pounds and a couple of ounces. So we'll call that one 33 pounds. We'll round down, you know, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that. And the ADV comes in at 39 pounds. There you go. The ADV is definitely a heavier board, and that's mainly due to the larger battery that's in it. It's also due to the larger motor. That cannon core stator is huge. That's where you're at with weight. The GTS definitely wins when it comes to weight. And then when it comes to size, it's funny, I don't know if you'll be able to see it right here, but when I line these up, ADV is actually shorter. It's more compact by a little bit than the GTS series. So it is actually a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact. Oh, one thing I totally forgot to mention on the weight though. So the interesting thing about the ADV is that it's actually a split pack. So that means there's a big old battery in the back, and then there's a smaller battery in the front here as well. So that does balance it out a little bit better when it comes to being tail heavy. Whereas the GTS, it's all in the back, but it's a smaller pack in the back. So it does feel definitely more balanced than the GT, but not quite as balanced as the ADV. Okay, looks and aesthetics. So the GTS, I mean, I don't think anyone can argue this is a beautiful board straight out of the box. I think it's probably the best look, no, it's definitely the best looking board that Future Motion's made. Straight out the factory, it looks great. Other than it being straight rails, you know me, I'm partial to some WTFs. I like the angled rails. I think they're more ergonomic and they look better, but absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I love the black powder coat on it. Everything's blacked out. Good looking board aesthetically. I'd say the S series, it's great. And then we've got the ADV straight out of the box. Now, it doesn't usually come with these yellow plastics right here. These are the V2 plastics because they had some issues with their V1 plastics being too brittle. So Floatwheel actually replaced everyone's plastics for free, which was pretty cool. But aesthetically out the box, it's a pretty darn good looking board. Now, the one thing that we did change on this is we did throw an Enduro on it. We actually don't have any ADVs here with the stock tire, but the stock tire looks very similar to the Enduro. So not any huge change there. I like the look of this thing. I don't really like the look of the ADV Pro, the one with the big old truss rails on it. I don't think those look great, but the ADV Standard I think is a really good looking board. Third-party support and customizability. So this one is pretty important, I think, when I'm shopping around for any sort of device like tractors, for example. I got a Kubota tractor last year, and one of the big reasons why I got it is there's a ton of aftermarket parts for it that I can put on it. It makes me a lot more likely to buy it if I can really make it my own, and there's a ton of stuff out there that I can put on it. So that's one huge benefit of the GTS. And it's funny, Future Motion doesn't really see it that way because they think all the third-party products are actually competition for them. They don't realize that the more awesome stuff there is that you can put onto your board, the more likely it is that you are to buy that board. There's a ton of stuff for the GTS, and the big reason for that is they didn't change too much about the GTS as far as aftermarket stuff goes, as far as compatibility. So all the stuff that fits the GT also fits the GTS. So there's a whole suite of products out there, rails, foot pads, hubs, grip tape, bumpers, ton of stuff that fits on it. Be sure to check out our website because we got a bunch of stuff. Put it on your GTS. Awesome. All right. There's my ad for the time being. The GTS wins all day in that category because the ADV doesn't really have a ton of products that can be used with it because the frame itself is different from any Future Motion board they've ever come out with. So there's a couple of things that you can put on the ADV. Like for example, they did choose to do a 6-inch hub on here, whereas it's a 6.5-inch hub on the GTS. So there are more tires available for the ADV as opposed to the GTS because every single tire that had to be developed for the GT and the GTS had to be completely redone because it's a 6.5-inch hub that literally does not exist anywhere else besides this board, which was really frustrating. So yep, more tires available for the ADV, but as far as that goes, you're kind of stuck with the foot pads for the time being, stuck with the fender, stuck with the bumper, stuck with the rails. Will all that change in the future? I'm sure it will as the ADV gets more popular, but it's sort of one of those things where it's like, do these aftermarket companies want to invest a ton of money in a product when there's only a few hundred or a few thousand out there? Does it need to get into like the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands before it starts to make sense? The GTS is definitely more customizable from a hardware perspective, but the ADV, when we're talking software, this thing is so customizable, it will make your head spin. Since the ADV is based on the VESC platform, it's all open source, all of the software. You can tune this thing like way more than you would ever even need to. So you can go into there and adjust every single bit about how this board rides from a software perspective. Whereas when we're talking with a Future Motion board like the GTS here, you're sort of stuck with what they've given you. And they did come out with custom shaping fairly recently, so that's been a nice addition. But there's still a ton of stuff that you can't do from a software perspective with the GTS that you can with any VESC-based board like the ADV here. So hardware, GTS wins all day. Software, ADV wins all day. All right, let's talk ease of use straight out of the box when this thing shows up on your doorstep. Not gonna sugarcoat it. GTS wins that by a mile. You pull this thing out, it's charged at 30% because that's how they have to ship it. You plug it in, you wait, and then as soon as it's charged, you jump on it, you open up the app, and you start riding. Super easy. ADV is gonna be a little bit trickier. So these things show up and you've got the whole frame is already built, but the motor comes in a separate box. So you do have to install the motor onto the rails, plug it in. It's not hard, it's pretty darn easy, but there is a little bit of assembly required. And then the really tricky part about this is that you do have to set it up in the VESC tool, so the software portion of it is definitely a little bit trickier to set up. Now, if you can follow directions, it's not hard to do, but there is a total extra step. You know, you're gonna spend an extra 15, 20 minutes doing the software in order to make sure that everything is ready to go and you can ride out the box. There are a couple of things that if you screw it up, it could potentially be dangerous. You could set your cutoff voltages wrong. So that's kind of a bit of a concern there. But again, as long as you follow the instructions correctly, you're good. That being said, I got a feeling this whole VESC platform is gonna get a lot easier to use over this next year. So I'm sure that it is right now the most difficult it's possibly gonna be to set up. It's only gonna get easier, so there you go. But that being said, straight out of the box, when it shows up on your doorstep, you want something that's just straight up, jump on it and you can ride right away. GTS by a mile. If you're even a little bit handy and you can just figure stuff out and you can read directions, the ADV is not that bad when it shows up. Repairability and cost of ownership, I feel like I could spend all day talking to you guys about Future Motion's whole repair process and how it could be improved. But you know what? I actually made a whole video about that like probably a year and a half ago. So go watch that if you want to hear about it. But essentially the long and short of it is if you have any Future Motion Onewheel, you can't really fix it yourself. And they won't sell you parts to fix it yourself. And let's say the controller goes out, they won't just send you a new controller that you can just plug in. The entire board has to go all the way back to the Bay Area in California in order to get repaired by Future Motion. You have no idea what the cost is going to be. They won't tell you until it gets there. And then if you don't like that cost, then you got to pay 80 bucks for shipping to get it back and try to figure it out yourself. But again, you can't really repair them yourself. Kind of got you by the short and curlies on that one. So that's a little bit frustrating. The nice part about that, if we're trying to find some silver lining here, is that you can be pretty rest assured. Now there's obviously times where this hasn't happened, but you can be pretty rest assured that when you send it back to them, they're actually going to fix it correctly because they have all the diagnostic tools for that. And again, I know I've personally had experiences where they didn't fix it correctly, but the vast majority of the time, you can kind of bank on they're just gonna get it, they're gonna fix it. Yes, it's gonna cost you money. Yes, you're not gonna have your board for at least a few weeks, you know, but at the end of the day, you send it back, it's out of your hands, you don't have to worry about it, and then it shows up on your doorstep and typically it's fixed and you're good to ride again. Then we've got the ADV right here, where Floatwheel has said on their website, they've made a commitment to right to repair. So they will supply parts. So you can get a BMS, a controller module, a light control module. You can buy a new motor. You can buy all the parts for the ADV directly on their website, have them shipped right to you, and you can fix it yourself. Now, the downside of that is if you're not mechanically inclined like at all, if you're like my old roommate that I had when I lived in LA that had no idea and his mind was blown when I put a new doorknob on the door because the doorknob broke and he got stuck in the house and couldn't figure out how to get out. If you're like that, you know, maybe you need someone else working on your board and you shouldn't do that. But, you know, if you're even a little bit mechanically inclined, it's pretty darn easy to just throw modular parts into these things and get them back up and running. So that's like a really nice thing about that. The only tricky thing about that, again, is that you know, you do have to buy this thing like with crypto. It's a little bit more difficult. You can't just like buy it and have it show up at your doorstep like a couple days later. So take that with a grain of salt. It might be a good idea, you know, if you did have 2 ADVs that you could harvest one for parts, or maybe order a couple extra parts in case something goes out. But sort of a little bit of pros and cons there. It is super nice to have a right to repair over here, but it's also kind of nice to just be able to ship your board out and not have to worry about it, and then it shows back up to you. This is gonna be a lot more expensive to repair. This is gonna be a lot cheaper to repair. So which one works for you? I don't know, it depends on the type of person you are. Personally, I prefer this style way more than this style, but maybe you don't. Maybe you just rather have someone else fix your problems. You just throw money at them and there you go, you're done with it. So there you go. All right, so that is it. That is the ADV versus the GTS series comparison video. I hope you guys learned a little something. I hope this video has helped you made your decision on which one you'd rather have. Yeah, let me know if I missed anything. If you guys think that I missed something, throw it down there in the comments. Let me know. Maybe we'll go out and film another video about it, and see you around. What are you guys doing here still watching TV? Go, get out there. Go ride your dang boards. Whichever one you got, go ride it. Go have a good time. Float on, my friends.